Track. I see. All right, great.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming back for another Preptober session. If you can see and hear me, please say hello in the chat and let us know where you're joining from. Welcome, welcome. Nice to see some familiar names back. Yes, some of you are eating lunch with us now. Thank you for spending your lunchtime with us, depending on where you're from. Welcome. I see lots of different locations here, as always. I am Michelle. I'm the community lead with ProWritingAid. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. I have a couple of housekeeping notes to go over with you quickly before we welcome our speaker. So firstly, if you have not yet joined the ProWritingAid community platform on Circle, we would love to see you there. We have a special section just for Novel November. This is where you can stay in the know with everything happening with Novel November, with Preptober, everything that happens in December. This will be your central spot to just stay up to date with all of the goings on. You can view the schedule and RSVP to any individual events that you'd like to receive email reminders for, and then you'll be able to also see the Zoom link to join. You can chat with other NovNov participants in the chat space, and you can also join writer circles, as many as you would like. And that's to keep the conversation going. They're based on genre, subgenre, different interest groups, and there's also instructions for how you can create a new writer circle if you don't see the topic that you're looking for. You can also submit Q&A questions ahead of time for upcoming interviews with our ambassadors. We have an asynchronous AMA Ask Me Anything happening in the community this Saturday with author Mel Torrefranca. She's one of our ambassadors. She will be in there for a 2-hour block answering as many questions in the comments as she can. So definitely check that out. Submit your questions if you have anything you'd like to ask. You can also meet all of our NovNov ambassadors and sponsors. There's many sponsors who have special offers for you this month, and you can find all of the links that you need in those spaces. And you can also access event replays and session resources, and that will keep you up to date with everything that you may have not been able to attend live. You'll be able to see everything there, including all of your relevant links, any slides, audio transcripts, and the replay files. So you can check that out there. For our session today, if you have any questions for Seth, please use the Q&A box so we don't lose track of those. And if you would like to ask anything related to the product or your account, please email hello@prowritingaid.com, and that will put you in touch directly with our support team, who will be more than happy to help you. If you would like to chat with other NovNov participants in the session today, please go ahead and utilize the chat box for that. And if you want to make sure that your messages are seen by everyone, you can select everyone in the drop-down menu next to the word to above your text box. Any special links shared today will also be posted in the Zoom chat and in the replay post in the community. So with all that being said, I'm so happy to introduce our speaker, Seth Harwood. Seth Harwood earned an MFA in fiction writing from the Iowa Writers Workshop and has published 10 books, including the bestsellers Jack Wakes Up, In Broad Daylight, and Love of a Preacher Man. He has taught creative writing at Stanford Continuing Studies and Harvard Extension, among others. He currently coaches writers at writewithseth.com. With over 15 years of experience, Seth has guided dozens of writers to achieve their goals, write well, and have fun doing it. His popular Udemy course is titled Show, Don't Tell. Thanks so much for joining us, Seth. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, and then I'll let you take it away.
Hello. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for having me. Thanks to everybody for being here. I guess I'm going to try to pin my screen so I can see myself. And there I am. Great. So there's 121 of you here. Awesome. Thank you for coming. I love seeing where everybody is from. And I'm going to start out with some North Italy. Awesome. Nevada, Wales, Brighton, North Carolina. I love it. Lots of different time zones. So what I'm here to talk to you about is thriving in Novel November. I'm excited about you guys wanting to get into Novel November. Write a longer piece throughout the month. Keep showing up, keep writing, and I'm going to offer you sort of an ramp up into how to get going with your practice between now and the beginning of November, and then four rules that will really help you with sustainable writing and to make a practice that's really fun for you. So let's start out with some questions about you guys. The first question I have is, If you think about yourself as having a writing practice, a habit, or a routine, how many days per week are you writing now? You could just put that in the chat. 6, awesome. Daily, 4, 7, 5 to 6 days, 5, 4, 0, 0.5, 2 every day. Yes, you guys are awesome. I'm seeing a lot of writing here. Now I'm seeing some threes, ones, and twos. This is great. Just the fact that you know how many days a week you're writing and you have a sense about it. Brand new author, not enough data yet. Exactly. It's really about data and finding out what your practice is, what your habit is, and ramping up to this event where you're going to write consistently. We want to start to find that data. So then the next question is, how much do you write in each session? And this isn't so much like a quantity question, it's more about how do you measure it? Do you measure it in words per session? Do you measure it in hours or minutes? How do you measure it? 1,500 words minimum, 1,500 to 2,000. Great. Yeah, this is awesome. I thought more of you folks showing up would be sort of in the 500 word per day or below. So I'm really excited to see people doing 1,500 words on average. You guys are ready. You guys are ready to rock Novel November. So that's awesome. For some of you guys who are doing 1,500 and 2,000 or an hour daily, you're in great shape. 3,000 to 200, 2,000, 300 to 2,000, that's great. Some of the things that I'm going to talk to you about in terms of the practice will apply to you and may not, but then some of the rules that we're going to get to later, these are really going to help as well. And it looks like my next question was going to be, are you tracking your practice? It really looks like people are. So I love that. Great job. And then the next question is like, how is your muscle? Like the writing muscle, it could be your brain, and it's something that you build up just like any other kind of muscle. And the more writing that you're doing regularly, consistently, I really believe that writing a long piece like this, any kind of novel, is about writing consistently more than it is about writing um, a certain number of words each time you sit down. And so the more you do this and build your muscle, you create this really strong creative brain, which helps you to sit down at the desk, write a lot of stuff. And once you're at the point where you're doing 1,500 words a day regularly, you're in great shape. And before that, it's about training. So a lot of you guys, your practice, your baseline is already really good. You're ready to jump off for Novel November. That's awesome. I'm excited about that. And I was thinking, like, it's really like exercise. Like, it's sort of like building ahead for a marathon. Um, so you're going to ramp up. How do you train for a marathon? Seems like a lot of you guys are already starting to run that marathon regularly by running longer distances. Like, you don't run a marathon by going out and doing 26 miles or even 13 miles on your first day. If you try to do that every day for 5 days, your body's going to get wrecked. And the same thing can happen with you, for you, when you are, yeah, good answers. I'm just going to take a breath and slow down a little. I love this answer. Writing is breathing for me. It keeps me sane, one day at a time. Yes, thank you for loving the analogy. Slow and steady. So, how do you train for a marathon? You run a lot of days consistently, and you start small, you build habits, and you make it sustainable. And then you ramp up, and soon you can do more and more. So if you're interested in getting a short series of emails about how to ramp up your practice, for some of you, this might be perfect. For other ones, it might not work so well. Uh, Jeff has got a good one in here. You're a writer if you're writing. That's the only test. It's interesting. Like one of the things that we grapple with is sometimes it's easy for other people to say if I'm a writer or not. But that self-appreciation, that self-identification as writer, I think we all have a different point about when we can start to consider ourselves a writer. And, for me, it was like when I got my first book published, when I had a podcast and a lot of people were listening to the audiobooks of to my serialized audiobook. Yeah, start calling yourself a writer now. What are you waiting for? I feel like a lot of us, it's a hard thing to acknowledge ourselves as a writer because I know a lot of writers are hard on themselves. I was really hard on myself. I tend to be as well. But what we're here for and what I want to get to is the 4 rules for sustainable and fun writing. How to write this novel without burning out, getting lost, or starting to hate your story. So the first rule that we're going to look at is start small and ramp up gradually. Don't start with 1,600 words per day, although some of you are already ready to do that. If you're ready to, that's great. But if you're ramping up, you're not there yet. Don't just think that you're going to sit down and write 50,000 words by doing 1,600 words a day. You're going to get that brain muscle is going to cramp. There's another piece of it called the creative writing well, which we'll get to in a minute also. So start with a graduated approach. That's the advice that I was going to give. In week one, 200 to 300 words is great. You're building the habit. Week two, 400 to 600 words per day. You're increasing, you're getting into a higher comfort zone. And also, it's okay to write for 5 or 6 days a week. You don't have to write the whole 30 days. Like, just because you're a writer doesn't mean that you can't take days off like every other job in the world. So even in this 30-day stretch, if you need to take a day off to rest, that can be a really good thing. Someone asked in the chat, should we be starting now? I think depending on what your practice is now, um, if you're below 500 words, it might be good to start writing now just to get into the practice of that. Um, in Japan, when people are working on the pottery wheel and making pots or bowls or mugs, they spend like a whole year sitting at the wheel, just getting the feeling of sitting at it. And one of the things that happens in writing a lot like this is just the endurance of sitting at the desk. And so starting to build up those physical muscles as well as those mental muscles, that can be a good thing to start now so that when you do get into November, there's a lot of stuff going on in the chat. And I love that. But when you do get into November, you can continue to build up and start with um, a stronger foundation so that you can get to that 1,500 words and start getting your words up later. Um, the reason why the graduated approach works is that by week 3, you'll be hitting longer word counts and getting more written. You won't be burning out, and you'll be so connected to your story that the higher word counts will feel natural and not forced, even fun. Yeah, Keith has been writing code. Word count works against me for Anne. I think it's really individual. For some people, it really helps to count um, words per day, count their words. And for some people, it's an amount of time. For me, when I'm writing a rough draft, it's really a word count thing. And then when I get into revision, the word count isn't always even positive. So I start to track um, hours or minutes per day when I do that. One of the things that Hemingway talked about is the creative well. He talked about writing each day. He would do his word count, but he would make sure that he left some water in the bottom of the well. So if we believe this idea that once we plug into our story and we're writing it regularly at night, and when we're not writing, that's when the story is getting created, often by our subconscious. And so you want to set up that subconscious to write and to continue to create your story. Um, but you don't want to drain the water in the well all the way down to the rocks. Hemingway talked about it as saying that when you leave some water in the bottom of the well, it helps the water replenish over the night. And I guess this is true of wells. I think it's a metaphor that actually makes sense in terms of a well water situation, but I've never had a well, so I don't know. But I'm going to believe Hemingway on this one. So if you do write a lot of words right out of the gate and you're not ready for that in terms of the practice, not only can it make your brain muscle sort of have cramps like a runner might, or actually have some sort of injury, it makes it harder to get the words out the next day and the day after because you're draining the well all the way down. And so it's not going to come up as quickly. I believe that this is true. Um, and for me, when I've ramped up and all of a sudden blasted off and done like a 3,000 word day, usually the next day I'll have trouble writing or the day after. It's not like a hangover, but it's a little bit like it's just harder to get the story flowing and going again. So the next rule that I want to talk about is exactly about that. It's about getting your writing flowing and going the next day when you write. So my rule for this one is always stop where you know what's next. Whatever is going on, stop in a place where you know what's next. Don't stop at the end of a chapter or the end of a scene or when you finish something or when your grease is cold. I was doing research online this morning and I found out it was Floyd Mayweather who was the one who said can't cook with cold grease. And this isn't a car thing, but if you're a cook, you know that if the grease in the pan is cold, you can't cook. And so part of the idea is if you leave a little bit left in your head, like you know what's going to happen next, it could be in the middle of a conversation where you know what the other person is going to say next, or it could be just when a character entered the room, not necessarily cliffhangers, but something that leaves for you where you're going to go next the next day. So it's like, it might be a cliffhanger for the reader, but it could be anywhere in the middle of a chapter, and you know what's going to come next when you sit down the next day to write, right before revealing important information in the middle of an action sequence. Um, the reason I like this is because it gets you to sit down the next day. You have that little piece in your head, even just the little piece, and it helps you get going that next day. So it gives you momentum. It gets the grease flowing a little bit. It gets the grease heated. And then once you get that momentum, you're in good shape. So the curve of your energy, I believe, goes up and down as you write. And what I'm saying is don't stop down here in one of these bottom places. Don't stop down here. Like if you get to the end and you've written through a whole chapter, rather than stopping down here where your energy is low or you're going to set yourself up to start the next day with a blank page, I'm saying just sit with it, go a little bit longer that day, whether you've reached your word count or you're way past your word count, go a little bit longer and get the machine, get your thoughts, your ideas, your energy generating again. And then stop somewhere up here in this like above area. Like somewhere up here, stop when you're in this area. That didn't work so well, but I'm saying stop in the upper part of the curve so that you're not down here when the energy is low. When you pick up the next day, if you have just that little piece to go, it's going to help you keep your story flowing. It helps you keep momentum, and that can be really important. Yeah, thank you, Ella. That is my typewriter. I love it. Uh, I don't think you can cheat and just backtrack to the last high. And that brings me to my next question. Well, actually, it brings me ahead to one of the other rules, which I'll get to in rule 4. But the third part is map as you go. I know some of you guys are pantsers and some of you guys might be plotters. The idea that I like here is to be able to blend the two together. Um, sorry, I thought I had a slide about this, but I think I don't. But when you map as you go, it helps you pants, but also make sense of and see what's going on. Basically, I'm a pantser. I love pantsing. And part of the reason why I like it is because it helps me feel like I'm reading a good book as I'm writing it. So every day when I sit down, I'm excited. I'm ready to go. I want to find out what happens next. So the idea that I'm working with, Stephen Koch called this the scenario system. You might have read his book, The Modern Library Writers Workshop. but it's also been known as the breadcrumb system, like Hansel and Gretel. When they went into the forest, they left the breadcrumbs so that they could track their way back and find out. I don't think that worked too well for them, but the system of leaving breadcrumbs makes sense. So every day when you write your daily section, and then you immediately write 2 to 3 sentences summarizing what happened in each chapter or the scene that you completed. Um, how many of you guys use Scrivener? I'm curious. I like Scrivener. I think that Scrivener might even be one of the sponsors for ProWritingAid. And I'll show you a quick thing since we're running faster than I thought. I can show you a quick thing on Scrivener, which is how I did one of my novels. Um, and I'm actually going to go off of this to screen share for a second to do that. So this is can you guys see that or no? No, you can't. Yeah, you can see it. All right, great. So in Scrivener, what I do is there's 3 different views up here. This one is like the whole draft view. This one is like the cork board, and you can see that because this book has different parts. And so if I select this part, I can see the cork board. And up here is like the outline thing. I use it on a Mac, but it's on a PC as well. And so each day I write my chapter or the chapters that I write. And then over here on the left, I have a really short, basically the title that just lets me know what happened in this scene. When I started writing in Word initially, I had to like read and scroll to find the different parts that I wanted. And so using Scrivener, it's been really helpful to be able to go and say, okay, if I'm writing down here and I want to know, well, what happened back in the surf shop? What did they say? I can see that here. And so then I can pop back into that. But the other piece is each day when I'm writing, at the end of the day, I go in and for each scene or chapter, I use this part over here to write a really short synopsis of just what's going on. And so that's the synopsis that I can see when I go over here to the corkboard thing. I can see all these synopses, and I can also see it in the outline thing so that I can go back and look at the outline and the synopsis. Basically, this is my breadcrumb trail. I've got my really brief breadcrumb trail of chapter titles and what happened in them. And then I've got my more substantial outline over here. These are the longer breadcrumbs that have a couple of sentences. So for an example of what I would do for a scenario entry, I would say, Jack goes to Modi's home in Tiburon. He finds the time capsule from his Mac, and then the sneaker collection and that kind of things help. Um, Scrivener might be hard to learn, but I've got a tutorial on YouTube that can help you. Uh, I'll put my email address in the chat and you guys will have it and the ability to follow me on my website. I have a YouTube tutorial about how to take a novel that you're working on and bring it into Scrivener, which is really helpful. Uh, but you don't need to do this with Scrivener. In Microsoft Word or whatever you're using, I would just suggest having a separate document that you use as your breadcrumb trail or your scenario. And in that separate document, you just put all these um, chapter synopses, the explanation of what happens in each chapter, so you can look at them and go back. And then this is going to be something really cool too, because it's going to help you a lot in revision. Oh, I see there's separate Q&A. But when you're writing these pieces, you can just do just what happens. You don't need to get really far into it. You just want to do a couple sentences. So just the facts, ma'am, Agent Friday style. And why this works. You can find anything and track everything without losing forward momentum. You don't want to spend a lot of time going back and reading things or finding different stuff in the manuscript. And the big thing is you don't have to hold the whole story in your head Once you've been writing for a week or 2 weeks and you have more than 10,000 or 20,000 words, it's really hard to hold all of that in your head. So I really like this chapter that Stephen Koch has in his book, The Modern Library Writers Workshop. It's called Working and Reworking. And he talks about how to use a scenario both to revise, but also to revise, but also to sort of make notes as you go. So that brings us to our next rule. Never go backward. And this is another one that I think is really important. So starting small, ramp up gradually, that's about the muscle and the well. Always stop where you know what happens next. That's about keeping the grease hot and keeping that momentum each time you sit down, making it easier for yourself every time you sit down so that you can get it going again. And you don't end up in a situation where you just sit down for the day to write and you're staring at a blank page. Um, Next rule is map as you go so that you can look back and see where you've been. You can find stuff. And then from there, never go backward. This can be a really hard rule to follow. And there's a big psychological piece around that I'll talk about in a minute. And it's the most important because what really matters in this project is having forward momentum, and success is about creating a draft that is beginning, middle, and end. And from there, you can revise, you can do all the things, but often, if we start to go back a lot, the judge in us comes up, and then we could start to perfect, and we never get forward. So don't go back and read from the beginning. Don't go back and revise earlier chapters. Don't go back and fix problems you've noticed or polishing the prose that you've written. This is another reason why I really like the stopping in a place where you know what happens next, is that the next day you can literally just sit down. Oh, there's the sentence I was working on. He just got to the top of the escalator, and I know which guys are at the top and are going to interact with him. Boom, I'm in, I'm writing, I'm going forward. Someone just said, these rules explain why I didn't finish last year. Thank you, Emily Faithful. I hope that this year, this helps you work a lot better. Here's a big truth. Your daily feelings, especially at the beginning of writing practice and building your writing practice, your daily feelings about the quality of your work will fluctuate, especially in the first weeks. They go up and down. Some days I think that writing was great. Other days I think maybe the writing wasn't so good. Like Charles Barkley in the NBA said, you're never as good as your best game or as bad as your worst game. And the truth is, like, when you're starting that practice, when you're starting a novel, you will be judgy. You will judge the junk out of your writing as good, bad, indifferent. But the funny thing is with me, like when I go back months later and I read the novel, there's never a point where I read it and think, oh, this day was good writing. This day was stinky writing. Oh my God, this chapter, I sucked that day. This is terrible. Like when I go back and I'm reading it from much later with more perspective, it generally feels pretty much of a piece. Like it's my writing and it's basically it's a similar level of quality. So these judgments will come up, but they don't necessarily mean anything. You can just let them go and you don't have to go back and start fixing things. Just recognize that at the end of the project, you will know a lot more about your draft and your chapters and your characters and your story than you do at the beginning or anywhere in the first half. Does that make sense? Are you guys with me? I love this. We're up to 146 now. I feel like I'm flying. If I'm going too fast, let me know. I'm already on rule 4, so we're going to have a lot of time for thank you. Absolutely. All good. Take a drink of water. Third rule is map as you go. I will I'm going to be giving out the slide deck for this you'll be able to see the PDF, and the recording will be there as well. Michelle's going to help me with that. So never go backward. Instead of doing these things, do this instead. Write notes in your scenario document. Like when I was in Scrivener, when I was showing you guys the Scrivener, you'll see like um, over here in each of the chapters, I'll have this where I'm writing what happens. And then down here, I'll have notes that I put in later, like this thing I need to change, send a note to this guy. This needs breaking up into separates. Um, so I have a note section here, but if I'm doing a, a document in Microsoft Word for my scenario, I'm just going to put comments in there in bold. I'll put revision needed, make the gun more prominent. Give Marcus stronger motivation. I'll ask questions. That can be really helpful. Just questioning when those judgment comes up, when those judgments come up, just put the question in your outline in your scenario. And then when you get to the end of the draft and it's time to revise, then you go back and you're going to have a much better ability to answer that question than you do right in the moment when you're in the thick of it. So this works because every time you go backward, you break forward momentum and get trapped in revision loops, and you keep going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. What success is really about here is about getting to the end of the draft. Uh, and these notes that you're making as you go, they're going to be super helpful because then that winds up being your to-do list when you get to revision. So that can be really helpful. You get to revision, you've got a to-do list. It's great. I have an example that I show some of my clients of my to-do list. This is from the same novel, and I actually took this, it was about 5 pages, and I printed it out with the bold in it, and then stuck it up on the wall of my writing room. And then I would like put sticky notes on it, or I would, whoops, I would put sticky notes on it. I would write things on it in pen. I would check things off that I had done. And so these things that I have are these are the notes that I put as I was going. And then when I was doing revision, I would check things off. I would change my mind. I would respond to it. And I had like 5 pages of this up on the wall right by my working place, right by where I worked, and I would just mark it off. So in revision, I had a to-do list that really helped guide me when I got to that stage. The thing that this all comes down to some extent, is when you're doing your writing each day, you want to give yourself that gold star. So that's what the minimum is about, whether it's a word count or a timepiece. You want to know I did what I needed to do each day. And you're going to ask yourself, did I write well? And that's not the question we're going to focus on. We're just going to get rid of that, did I write well? And take away the judgment to make it a binary. So it's just, did I write? Each day, did I write? Did I hit my number, whatever it was? I like to really encourage people to shoot for like the lower side, maybe like a 50-50 goal instead of like a 75-25 goal. Like I want people to shoot for something where it's like, sorry, 75% success rather than 50-50. So like ramp up with things that you know you can accomplish. Give yourself those gold stars. You're going to start to feel better about yourself. And then once you've done this for a couple of weeks, you get to the point where you feel like, I wrote today, I did my piece, now I can go on with the rest of my life. Now I can go work. Now I can go play with my kids. Now I can go to the gym and exercise my body. So this is where you want to get. You want to get to the place where it's like, yes or no. Did I write? And then staying the course, that's going to help you. So never go backward can be a really hard rule to follow, but you can do it. And it's really important. Your goal is to complete your first draft. And the things that you plan in your scenario, these are your steps for your revision. This is your to-do list. 1,667 is 50,000 divided by 30, but you can ramp up, and maybe in weeks 3 and 4, if you're doing 2,000, you're feeling better and it's working better for you. So what does success actually look like? Success is about feeling good about the writing that you've done. Success isn't writing 50,000 words. It's not 1 month of writing and then the rest of your life you never write again. God willing, you write something that's good enough for you to complete it and revise it. And you want to do more with it. You don't want to burn out and never want to look at it again. Or there's so much random stuff in it, like grocery lists, because you just had to finish and get your 1,600 words. Success isn't that. Success is writing consistently for 30 days as a practice. And I'm going to say, 5 or 6 days a week. If you want to do 7 days a week, go ahead and do it, but you don't have to. You can do the numbers and you can write in December. You want to complete a full story arc and have beginning, middle, and end, or maybe you're just heading toward the end. And then you can keep going in December to get there. And building this sustainable practice is going to work better for you because you're going to feel good about your writing. You're going to feel good. Your brain muscle's not going to be looking like it would after getting smashed with a CrossFit workout or a month of CrossFit workouts when you've never done CrossFit before. Your brain muscle is still going to be that picture of looking strong. Your characters are going to be feel like they're real to you. The draft is going to be good enough to revise, and your enthusiasm is going to be up still. So that's really what success is. You might end up with 35,000 words or 65,000 words. The number matters less than having a story that you're excited to develop and you're not burned out. It's really about some of this is about sort of the water in the well, but also your energy level. The thing about being a writer, I'm going to just switch gears for 1 second, give you guys the full look while I tell you this. The thing about being a writer, and most of you are writing without a writing coach. I coach writers and I really help writers. But for a long time, I was the writer and the coach. And 90% of the writers who I know are so hard on themselves. It's like if you're a jockey on a horse track, they call it giving the horse the whip to get the horse to go faster. And the reverse of that is giving the horse his head, where you just let the horse run and do his own thing. And as writers, what I see again and again is that we are so hard on ourselves. And so there's part of like listening to ourselves and knowing where our energy is and how we have to treat ourselves. Like if you were your boss, would you be a good boss or would you be like the hardest boss you've ever had? I know for me, I've been so hard on myself as a boss, and working through that has really allowed me to have more joy, more consistency in my writing, and my books have gotten a lot better as I've done that. So that's my plug for that. That's what success is. Take care of yourself. Let me go back and say what I'm just going to write that in the chat. Take care of yourself. Give the horse his head. I don't know where that I don't know where that name comes for it, but that's what jockeys call it. Give the horse his head. So let's go back and look at the 4 rules. Not put the horse's head in the bed, give the horse his head. So the 4 rules. One, start small. I know some of you are doing 1,500 words a day. I know some of you are out there 100% in this world of 138 writers on this call. Some of you are not doing 1,500 words a day right now. You're doing less than 1,000. You're doing 500 or less. That is absolutely fine. John Grisham had a piece in the New York Times where he said he wrote 200 words a day every day for a year, and that made a novel. And when I read that, I was shocked because everyone I knew was trying to bang out 2,000 words a day, 4,000 words a day. We were killing ourselves. And here he is having all this success. And it occurred to me like, oh my God, I could do less and be okay. When I was in grad school, Ethan Kanan, who's a writer that some of you might have heard of, he always said, like, write 10 minutes a day. Some days it'll wind up being more. Some days it'll just be 10 minutes. But if you keep up that consistency, that's what's going to get it. So the hot grease piece is about helping yourself with that consistency. Always stop where you know what comes next. Keep that hot grease, keep that little bit of grease hot. You sit down the next day, it helps you with the momentum. It helps you get that curve going back up toward the energy again. Uh, Map as you go. Create the scenario. Use that as a map going backward or a breadcrumb trail. And then you can put notes on that to help yourself for revision. And you can add questions to that as well. Not just notes or to-do lists, but questions that you'll be better able to answer later. And then that helps with never going backward. Keep that momentum forward. Keep writing toward the end of your story. I'm 100% pantser and I love it. And that's how you get to the end. Your goal is to get to the end of the story, however long the story is, or whatever, or how long it takes you. Get to the end. Don't go backwards. Make those notes and then keep writing forward. That is what I have for you. And I hope that you have fun in Novel November. The story you discover might surprise you. Sometimes the best writing advice isn't about inspiration or technique. It's about some simple systems that keep you showing up. Sooner or later, the magic will start to happen. Here's a QR code to check out my website. I've got a lot of blog posts and tips on there that you can read and more coming out. So please subscribe and I'd love to hear from you. I hope that you enjoyed this segment.
Thanks so much, Seth. This was great. We have quite a few questions in the Q&A box now, so we can just try and get through as many as possible. If you have not yet entered your question, please do so now, and we'll see how many we can get through. All
This is
right,
great.
so the first is from Claire, who asks, does it have to be quality writing, or is it more important just to hit the word count?
Uh, I I think the question of whether it's quality or not isn't as important in that moment of that day. It's just to get to your word count. But the thing is, too, like when I've tried this before, if I'm trying to hit 1,600 words out of the gate, and I've heard other people do this as well, they just start journaling or free writing in there because they want to get to 1,600 words. One trick that I use is every day when I sit down to write, I have a separate Word document that I pull up and I just put the date on it and I write my word count for the larger project. And then I just write off the top of my head whatever needs to come out of my head. Oh, the cat needs more litter. I need to get this at the grocery store. Boy, that was really annoying what happened last night. I just get all that out of my head onto a Word doc. And then when I know it's time to really write, I go over to the novel and then I plug in, I do the next piece. And for me, that works to get those quality words. And then I can get to the point where I know the words that I'm writing are all connected to my novel and of a piece coming from that well that I talked about. And then it's really just like, I'm doing it, I'm doing it. And that's where sort of building up gradually really helps you. Yeah,
Jessica
Brenda.
Jessica says, I am in my second draft. By November, I will be developing my third draft. I am almost certain my word count will go down. I don't want to change my flow or lose momentum. How will the Nov goals be impacted by that process?
So I guess my question there is like, are you revising or are you like my sense of the Nov goal is like to do a draft. And so if I've got a book that I have two drafts of, if I'm going to start from scratch and do a complete rewrite, maybe Nov works for me. But if I'm working off of a scenario like that and I'm approaching revision from a to-do list standpoint, it doesn't, I mean, maybe I want to do Nov just to like show up and have consistency and work with other writers and be in a community. But yeah, it's not about word count so much. It's just about going through and getting my things done and knowing that I sat down and did the work each day. So I guess in that case, that's the kind of situation where I would use a time goal, whatever your time goal is, 10 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, something really attainable. I would use a time goal to count yourself as accountable and give yourself that gold star rather than saying, I got to do this kind of word count. Because with revision, some days I work for 2 hours and I lose 200 words. Some days I work for 2 hours, I gain 100 words. Some days I work for 2 hours and I gain 1,000 words. Like it's so variable with revision.
Keith asks, do you count all the words in your Bible slash world building slash plot arc slash character descriptions and scene outlines or just the rough draft?
I count all of it. I think one of the mistakes that I made earlier on in my writing career is that I was so driven by like this 1,500 words a day thing that I didn't allow myself to do research during my writing time. And I was just like forcing myself to get the words down. And then later, when I became more forgiving and I allowed for shorter word counts, then I was able to switch gears in the middle of a writing session and go do research, whether it was on sneakers or guns or worldwide travel, like whatever that research was, that really helps the book. And so I count that work as writing time just as valuable as my word count. And so if you're doing the world building or the character sketches, I don't usually do that kind of work that way, but I would absolutely count that as part of your words or part of your time for the day because it's super helpful and it's going to help your book.
Lena asks, how would you avoid self-beating if by the end of week 2 you realize you haven't written that much or you haven't written quality stuff?
I would say ask yourself if the stuff is quality when you get to the end of week 4. Like when I'm at the end of week 2, sometimes I'm really down on myself. And I'm down on myself if I haven't been writing consistently before starting the Nov Nov goal or the sprint and I'm just like trying to jump into this workout. It's like when you go to the gym or when you do a running program, sometimes it doesn't feel good or you don't feel happy about it. But then the more you do it, it starts to feel good. That's what I'm really hoping for with this and hoping for you guys is that once, and I've seen this with my clients again and again, once you get to the point where you're doing that consistency, whether it's 3 times a week, 4 times a week, 5 times, 6 times a week, whatever it is, when you're showing up consistently and that well is rebuilding and replenishing the fun story stuff. Thanks, Linda. Uh, that's when the fun content starts coming out and it's enjoyable. And it's not so much, was my writing good? Is my writing bad? It's like, oh, the story. What are the characters going to do next? What's going to happen next? And that can just be, for me, that's where the joy comes in and I really start to have fun.
We have a couple of questions regarding focus. Megan asks, what is the best way to avoid distractions and form that focus space for the writing each day?
For me, the closer I can get between getting out of bed and writing, the better. So, like the fewer things I can do in between breakfast, coffee, exercise, those are fine. But if I even check email, my brain starts going in a million directions. If I start to check email, never social media, but if I start to check email and do things, then it just feels like one thing leads to another. I have to, oh, this leads to this. I have to do this. Oh, and then let me see if I got more. It's like all this crazy stuff. So I try to write first thing in the morning, and not everyone can do that. If you can't do that, just take, I really think meditation is good. Just sitting for 10 minutes or 5 minutes and just focusing on your breath, letting go of the thoughts. Some of these are also in that practice thing that I talked about. Um, I'll put a link to that in the chat. The practice email series talks about some ways to really clear the decks like this and get focused. Um, but meditation and absolutely like turning off all the other apps on your computer. My computer does not make any dings or noises. There's no notifications. On my Mac, I go up in the upper right and I turn off all notifications. They never come on. My email doesn't ding. I don't have social media things. And sometimes when I write, I'll just go into that thing and turn off Wi-Fi. I need Wi-Fi when I'm doing research online, but I'll just turn off Wi-Fi and unplug from all that stuff and shut down my mail program, shut down the browsers, all of it.
We have an anonymous attendee who asks, any advice for going into circles in revision? It seems I'm eternally editing and revising after completing the manuscript.
Yeah, I think at that point, it can be really important to get feedback from a good reader. I know some people are in workshops out there and they'll get a lot of advice that's conflicting. Some workshops aren't always the most effective, but often, like when I started, the first book that I wrote, I went back over it again and again and again. All I knew how to do was like try to correct the typos or try to fix sentences because that's all I had learned in school. I didn't know anything about how to revise, how to look at structure. That's one of the things that I really like in the Stephen Koch piece is that he talks about before you do anything else in revision, before you do any wordsmithing or proofreading or copy editing, you look at the structure of it. And that's the place where you finish the draft. You've been down there at ground level, like looking at all the trees and the bark and stuff. And then you zoom out and you just look at the scenario. You're just looking at the forest from like 1,000 feet up and then you can tell, like, oh, there's a weird gap over here, or oh, this whole part over here doesn't really connect. And then you can look at structure. So if you're going around and around with your draft and revision, I would just say, how much are you looking at structure? How are you looking at structure? Because for me, that's what revision is really about. Copy editing is language, proofreading is language, and revision after the draft is done really needs to be about structure. And so that's a place where it's really important for me to get feedback and use that scenario method to look at, what does this look like in a 3,000 word scenario? What does this look like in a 1,500 word scenario? What does this look like in a 500 word scenario? And that gets me not to just distill words, but to really figure out what are the priorities of my story? What are the most important parts of my story here? And then I know those are the parts I need to keep.
Okay, we have another anonymous attendee who asks, I tend to underwrite. I love dialogue, but I sometimes forget to add enough scenery and descriptions. Should I go back and add these on the same day or just not worry about it during drafting?
Not worry about it during drafting. For me, a lot of the times when I've written a book, it kind of seems like a skeleton at the end. But that's fine. It's a way of me finding the story. And as I find the story and get to know the characters better and the settings, by the time I get to the end, I can visualize this a lot better. And so then I go back through and I do what I call adding meat to the bones. And maybe that'll add like another 20,000 words on the draft. But that's where I'm really fleshing out the scenes more, and it's easier to do then because I have a better picture of the characters. I know them better. I know the events better and I know what's important. So, yeah, I would do it at the end in revision.
Namra says, so I'm a pantser and I'm trying to be more of a plantser instead. I'm working on writing a short outline for each chapter in Preptober before I write my chapters in November. Should I then also do rule number 3 as well, or should I just do one or the other? I hope this makes sense.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is fine. Try it, see if it works for you. The reason why I'm more of a pantser is because my brain just operates in sentences, not in outlines. But I think you should still do it because one of the big things is that what winds up being on the page is going to be different than what your outline was when you went into it. So it's really important to write down in the scenario with your breadcrumbs what happened when I put this on the page. This was my goal, but then this is actually what happened. So I'm mapping what happened. There's a book that I like by Roger Rosenblatt where he says one of the big dangers of using an outline is that your book will end up exactly like your outline. And for a lot of us, that can be boring. That feels like we're sort of like stuck in. There's no discovery in the writing process. So as you start to discover, you're spending more time with the characters, more time with the story. It's inevitable that things are going to change. And when you go with that, the map that you're doing as you're using the breadcrumbs, that's going to change and be different from your outline. And that's ultimately a reflection of what you've written and what you want to revise.
Cheryl asks, what are some techniques to effectively employ rule number 4 when you are revising, and how do you effectively measure?
Rule number 4, never go backward. I think in revision, I do bop around, but one example of never going through in revision is like once I have that scenario, like the one that I showed where I was marking it up in pen, once I have that and it's like a to-do list, it keeps me from just reading through from page 1 to 350 or whatever, and I can just go down the list and check things off. And it's much better. Like if I start reading in the manuscript, then I'm changing sentences, I'm changing words, I'm getting way in there. And in revision, I want to have that like higher up view. So chronologically, I'll just go through and check off the things on the manuscript that I've written in my scenario. And that's how I keep from going backward, is that I've got that scenario as a to-do list to guide me through the steps.
Avenue Potter says, when I use dictation, I find I have to go back at the end of the day to add proper quotes, commas, periods, etc., and to make sure it actually wrote down the words I meant. I can't imagine waiting until the end of a novel to go back and do all of this. Is it okay to do this daily as long as I'm not editing for perfection?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think I really like the idea. I've played with the idea of using dictation to write a novel, and I haven't been able to do it. But when I've tried it, the same thing has happened to me, and I need to fix those things that day because that's when I know what I actually meant. And I would never want to do a whole novel's worth of fixing like that in a stretch. So yeah, I would say do it that way.
Lily asks, how would you make time for writing if you're busy with school and work?
Yeah, it's hard. Um, I would just say the thing that's important is the consistency, not the amount of time. So think about John Grisham, super successful author. Whatever you think of his books, he's made a lot of money. He was working as a lawyer and he was doing 200 words a day. Whatever your schedule is, you can do 100 or 200 words a day. And if you do it 5 days a week or more, then the water in the well starts happening. The your subconscious starts generating story as you sleep, and things will really start to play out. So I would say if you have a lot going on in your life, which I know a lot of you do, just use small goals. You don't have to hit 50,000 words. You just have to have an experience in writing in November and enjoy it. And the more you enjoy it, the more you'll keep doing it. And then the more likely it is that you'll finish a book and have a good product.
Megan
These are,
asks, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no,
Megan asks, how much time do you spend researching during an event like this?
during the event
Yes.
while I'm talking.
No, I think they mean during Novel November, during
Oh, yeah,
the
yeah,
writing
yeah.
challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about this a little bit before. Like early on, I wouldn't do the research, and I think my book suffered as a result. And these days, now that I'm in my 50s, I would be less focused on hitting the 50,000 word goal and more focused on the quality. And when I do the research, I was writing a book that had a lot of sneakers in it. And I started watching things online about sneakers and looking at stuff online. And maybe my word counts went down, but the readers later on could feel the energy of my excitement from the research in the book, in the writing. And that made it so much more worthwhile. So it's like follow your energy, follow what's exciting for you. If you really need to figure out some research questions to get stronger and be more excited about where you're going, to feel more solid and comfortable going into the next unknown part of your story, then do it. And you can't always do all the research beforehand because you don't know all the things that you need to figure out. You don't know what you don't know.
I think we have time for one more question. This is an anonymous one. Do you have any advice on how to restart writing after stopping for a while because of life priorities?
Yeah, I think that one can be really tricky, particularly with regard to I'm the thing that comes to my mind when I hear that question is I wrote the beginning of something, I wrote part of something, and I want to get back to it. And it's really hard to do because I took a break for a while. I went through a situation like this, and I took a 3x5 card. This probably isn't it, but I took a 3x5 card and I wrote on it, make a mess, and I stuck it to my monitor. And the fear that I had was if I wrote from just picking up from scratch, that I was going to write stuff that was worse than everything else I had written in the novel. And the fear was whatever I wrote was going to be really bad and it was going to ruin all the break. And so I just gave myself permission, like make a mess. If I write the worst stuff, so be it. But I also knew that like I was never going to write the absolute worst stuff that I was imagining. So once I gave myself permission to just write and start adding words onto the end of it, then it started to get longer again. And it's sort of the same thing about developing the practice. Originally, I was really judgy. Oh, I'm going to ruin this whole thing. Oh, this isn't good. But that just happens when you start up again. And you need to just like put those judgments aside. They're not always relevant. You can write down the questions and come back to them when you finish. When it's the same thing as the practice. Start small, build up, use rule number one, gradually go up, never go backward. And just go back to the rules. That's going to help you. And you can also use the benefit of doing the mapping of all the stuff that you wrote before you took the break. That's what I got.
All right, thank you so much. This was lovely. This will be posted to the replay space if anybody wants to go back and rewatch anything. And we'll also have all of Seth's links there as well and his presentation. Thank you so much for joining, and we will see you at the next session. Bye, everyone.